So welcome to the 83rd ITEEA conference, virtual conference this year. Crazy what's happened in the world, but we are here live with you in this virtual environment. My name is Chris Merrill. I'm a professor at Illinois State University in the Department of Technology, where I help to prepare technology and engineering education students.
Okay, and I'm Dr. Brad Christensen. I work as a curriculum specialist at the Center for Mathematics, Science, Technology at Illinois State University, where we develop STEM curriculum and then work with teachers on implementation.
Excellent. So Brad and I are here to share with you what we call a professional teaching and learning in technology and engineering education using the 5E process. So over the past year, Brad and I and several others have worked with over 1,000 Illinois technology and engineering education teachers, as well as other career and technical education teachers, on how to prepare and deliver a new kind of format for teaching and learning, and it's called the 5E process. So today we want to walk you through each of the E's and then show you how this works. So our first E in the 5E process is engage. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Dr. Christensen is going to engage you in today's activity.
Okay, we're going to start with the engage activity. The engage activity helps our students get interested in what we're going to be talking about. I want to show you how this can work here. I want you to take a round object. I'm using this is actually the cylinder head off a pressure washer. I know you thought it was something else. I'm going to cut a strip of paper. So I have a piece of paper. I have a scissors. I'm going to cut that strip of paper there. I'm going to wrap this paper around my cylinder block, and I'm going to cut it off so that it does not overlap. A little bit more right there. Okay, comes together. Now, back in grade school, you learned what this was, but you've probably forgotten. What's the distance around a circle called? What is this length? Yeah, if you remember from grade school, that's called the circumference. The distance around a circle is the circumference. Why didn't you remember that? Oh, because you never had to use it. You had it on a worksheet back in grade school, and you never did anything with it. Okay, let's measure that circumference. What's the distance called from side to side of a circle? You learned that back in grade school too. It's called the diameter. So we're going to compare the diameter to the circumference. Notice how I have that lined up right there at the end. I'm going to put a mark right here. There's one diameter, two diameters, and three diameters. Didn't come out quite right. 1, 2, 3, plus a little bit left over. So what's the formula if we want the formula of circumference? Circumference equals diameter times 3 plus. We don't really know 3 plus what, but a little bit over 3. Now, does that make sense to you? Have you seen that before? What's 3 plus a little bit? Ah, yes, it's pi. And now you remember and you say, oh yeah, circumference equals diameter times pi. Pi is 3.1416 or thereabouts. Now, why do we do this? Okay, I want to cut it right there. So why do we do this? Well, back in grade school, you were taught circumference equals diameter times pi, and you did that over and over again on worksheets, and you didn't remember it. Now, we spent 5 minutes cutting a piece of paper, wrapping it around a round object. We actually got to touch it. Now it makes sense. You say, oh, yeah, I know what that is. And now you're going to remember it. So The engage part of this activity is just to get them interested. What we did here, we did this project in order to help you realize that if we get our hands on something, if we get to use a project as the vehicle, that it makes the learning makes much more sense to us. It clicks in our mind. That light bulb comes on our eyes. It's yes, we understand that. Of what?
Excellent. Thank you, Brad. So that was the first E of the 5E process. So we're going to shift gears and go to the second E, which is called explore. And actually, I have two explore activities for you. So I am going to quickly share my screen, and we are going to explore manufacturing processes. So imagine that you're teaching manufacturing. Maybe this is the beginning of manufacturing, and you want to expose students to manufacturing in real life video, and then have the discussion about what kind of processes are happening. So we're going to explore this. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to watch a short video on skateboard manufacturing. Okay, so I have this video from YouTube. I'm going to make it full screen and push play, and you'll be able to see this.
Each ply that goes through the glue machine is consistently coated with the exact amount of glue to hold it together. There's a lot of manufacturers out there that are going to tell you, they're using, Canadian maple and all this. A lot of manufacturers that are just ordering shipments of skateboards from China, and that's what we're trying to stay away from. Everything's made by skateboarders who skate. We just want to make it the right way, as if we were making them for ourselves. Whether it be a shop deck or a company deck, every board's going to be made with the same quality. Everything's getting the right amount of glue, the right amount of pressure. We're not trying to pop them out real fast. We're leaving them pressed, for over an hour. We just want to make sure everything that goes out is, real strong and made for the skateboarder of the day.
Okay, so I stopped sharing that. So we've introduced, Brad through the engage function, and now we're going to explore content. So we just showed a very quick video on skateboard manufacturing. So as a teacher, I might show that. I might actually bring in a skateboard so students could see a real skateboard, and then start asking them questions so they can explore their content. For example, what kind of manufacturing processes were used in the making of that skateboard? Well, students might say, oh, well, I saw some glue. Yeah, so there was some gluing, right? So their application of gluing each of the plies together. And then you say, wow, I saw some big thing kind of come down and press the plies together. So yeah, we can start talking about forming through a press, right? So then, I saw them do some bandsaw work to do a rough cut of the skateboard. Oh, and then I saw a fixture holding that skateboard where they came in and did the correct shaping of the board using a sander. So students start to explore the different manufacturing processes. You might also ask, so what kind of materials were used? Here's a second one. Here's a typical number 2 pencil, right? A wooden number 2 pencil. So here's what we'd like you to do. And again, this would be for your students. We would like you to sketch what a pencil looks like. Okay, so you have that. Sketch what a pencil looks like. And our virtual ITEA background is kind of wiping me out a little bit. So here we go. So here's a number 2 pencil. I want you to sketch that out. After you sketch this, label the parts. Okay, so how many parts of this pencil are there? So yes, we have the wood, right? We have the wooden barrel of the pencil. We also have what we would be determined the lead, right? But in all reality today, it's graphite. We would have this metal ferrule on the top. We would have an eraser, right? That's made out of rubber and another product called pumice. So, oh, look, Brad is maybe even sketching out a pencil right in front of us. So we want to sketch a pencil and then label the parts. So now we could have a discussion of the manufacturing processes involved in making a pencil, and then determine from our materials whether or not we want to keep using these kinds of materials. Are they renewable, non-renewable? Are they organic? Are they inorganic? So we, as a class, the students and yourself, could have a discussion about how a pencil is manufactured. So this could be a really good explore activity as well. Okay, so they've labeled this. Brad is doing a great job at this sketch there. So we have a pencil, we've got the blank, we've got the lead, we've got the ferrule, we've got the rubber eraser. All right. So could you ask students how a pencil is manufactured? Yeah, we could do that, right? And they could discover that, how today's pencil is manufactured. We could have other questions like, what kinds of materials? Why are we sketching? Do we need a sketch? Do we need a technical drawing? All of these kinds of questions lead us into the explanation or the explain part of the 5E process, which is number 3. So we had engage, we had explore, where we're looking at manufacturing, and then we turn to the engage function. Now, the whole idea of the engage function is for you as the teacher to start that formative assessment process. So as the students either orally start explaining how things are manufactured, or they actually turn in something, we can start to formatively assess, hey, are they on the right page? Okay, so that formative assessment is that explain it. So students are explaining orally or in writing or by drawings their understanding of the content. All right, so engage, explore, explain. Brad, what might be that 4th E? You're muted.
Doesn't that happen all the time?
Happens to all of us all the time.
Okay, the 4th E is the elaboration section. So we engaged in this lesson with manufacturing. We engaged them with a skateboard because they're all excited about skateboards. We explored the pencil with the parts of the pencil, the manufacturing of the pencil, the components of the pencil. We explained, part 3, they explained to us what they saw, some of the processes, some of the materials, some of the sources, inorganic, exhaustible, inexhaustible, renewable, those types of things. Okay, and the elaborate section is where we take this one step further. Let me share my screen here real quick and show you how this works in this particular lesson. In the elaborate section, the teacher is going to give you a bunch of photos of shaker benches. We're going to study those photos of shaker benches and talk about how this bench works, how it functions, what might break if you overload it, things like that. And then we're going to have them redesign a shaker bench. Okay, they can make any bench they want, but we want it to be along the lines of a shaker bench, not just any old bench. It's got to be a shaker bench. So to do that, they have to kind of understand what the design parameters are. They're going to redesign it so it keeps the same function, but so that it is more environmentally friendly. So we're using materials that are more locally sourced. We're using finishes that are less toxic, things like that. Okay, the final E of the 5E lesson is the evaluate section. And in this case, we're going to apply a rubric to the work that they did in the elaborate section. They're going to, what kind of materials did you use for your new shaker bench? What are your fasteners? How are you holding this thing together? And what about your joints? What joinery are you using that will make this a very strong bench? And why are you using those joints? So that's the 5E process. Okay, Chris, you want to take us back to the some questions about that?
Yeah, so we have walked you through an engage activity where Brad led you through circumference, right? And so now you've got your hands on an activity. Your students are hopefully really engaged. We've taken you through an explore, actually 2 explore activities where we looked at manufacturing from the skateboard perspective and then a pencil perspective. And then in the explain section, we went through how you could use a formative assessment to make sure your students are learning what you want them to learn. So on your screen, as I was talking, you could see kind of the difference between a 5E process and what we would normally term like a teacher-directed or teacher-centered lesson. So again, we went through engage, which is our first step, and then explore, and then explain. So in the engage section, we're giving something to the students to put their hands on, right? To get them involved, right? What's the hook, right? Give them the hook of the lesson. So in that section, the students are simply following your direction, right? And then you're facilitating the activity. In the explore section, we're allowing students to explore in greater detail the activity or the content surrounding that activity. So again, what are the students doing? They're doing the activity. What are we doing? We might provide the necessary materials for them to do that activity. So we had a video where they're exploring the manufacturing processes. We showed them a pencil. So again, do they have a pencil? If not, give them a pencil. And then they had a sheet of paper and they could sketch that pencil. In the explain, we could do one of 2 things. We can orally present questions to them. We could do a Kahoot type of activity for them, or we could give them written out questions where they would supply answers. So we could check formatively, are they learning about manufacturing the way we intended them to learn? All right, so now we get to the 4th section, and this is the elaborate. So the students are elaborating, learning more about that content. Okay, they're participating in an activity, and Brad led you through that. We know manufacturing, we looked at a skateboard, we looked at a pencil, and now he said, look, let's elaborate on manufacturing, let's look at a shaker bench, right? So how could we redesign a shaker bench to be environmentally friendly, using joinery, using fasteners, using materials? So that's elaborating on that manufacturing. And then finally, the evaluate, right? So how are we evaluating our students? So the evaluation, the language should be in the kid's voice, the student's voice, and this is the evidence that we're going to collect that the students have learned what we intended them to learn in the introduction to manufacturing processes.
But Chris, when do I lecture?
Actually, you're not lecturing, right? You are facilitating, and I don't want to say a teacher is the facilitator, right? We are more than facilitators. But in this 5E lesson plan, we have set up a really nice lesson. We know what's, well, at least we think we know what's going to happen. And we're providing cues to our students to, elaborate, to explain, to evaluate the content. So teachers not lecturing.
But how can I expect them to know something if I don't teach it to them first?
We learn by doing. And we're using that activity as that vehicle of learning, right? So it's not stand and deliver, right? It's not do the even problems today, the odd problems tomorrow, test on Friday. We are doing the activity so they are learning through that content.
And, we've discovered as we've worked with a lot of teachers on this process, that those are the 2 questions they ask most often. And that's what they struggle with most. Because think about how we were taught to teach. You tell them what you told them, and then you tell them once again what you've told them. They don't listen anyway. So we got to tell them and tell them and tell them. But if we use the project as a vehicle, so we're talking about the project as the Monday morning thing, not the Friday afternoon thing. You say, oh, but I don't have time to do the project. On Monday morning, you have time to do the project. On Friday afternoon, you probably don't. Use the project as the vehicle for the instruction.
Well, we've hoped through this very short session on professional teaching and learning using the 5E process, this is something you'd like to tackle. And to help you kind of tackle that, Brad and our team have developed what we call the practical lesson writing guide. And this practical lesson writing guide, you're like, oh man, I know how to write a lesson plan. Well, this is a fun lesson plan, right? These are the questions that you would ask yourself, hey, what's the title of my lesson? Oh, I write it down. Hey, what do I think students ought to learn out of this? Oh, you write it down. And when we finish this practical lesson writing guide, you're going to come out with a killer lesson. So Brad's going to kind of walk you through this practical lesson writing guide.
Okay, let's take a look at this. Let me share my screen. Hopefully you can see that okay. We've used this with a lot of teachers over the last several months. Box number 1, what's the topic? You say, oh, I'm going to teach some welding. I'm going to teach some aerodynamics. I'm going to teach some joinery and woods, whatever it might be. What's the topic? What do we want them to know? So think about that. What is it that you really want them to know? What's really important for them to know about this topic? Now, some people will say, oh, the objectives of the lesson. Well, yeah, it is basically the objectives of the lesson, but really it's what we want them to know. It's what we think is important. Why do you think they need to know it? Box 3, why do they need to know this? They're going to need to, and if you say they need to know it because it's on the test, scratch it off your lesson. Okay, and no good at all. If they say, oh, but they're going to need this when they go to 8th grade next year. And no, that's not a good reason. Why do they need to know it? Okay, then educational standards. Maybe we're looking at the standards for technology and engineering literacy, or maybe we're looking at next generation science standards, or maybe we're looking at the math standards or something like that. But what standards are being addressed here? Write those down. Now, 5 years after graduation, what do you want them to remember? You want them to say, oh yeah, I remember that deal about the diameter and the circumference and pi and all that. Yeah, I got that down now. What should they remember? These are your enduring concepts. Remember a few years ago when we were doing curriculum development, and enduring concepts was something that kept coming up? What should they know 5 years from now? What are they going to remember? Okay, box 6. This is where it gets a little bit different. Box 6 is actually step 5 of it's the 5th E of the 5E process. It's the last thing that you do when you teach the lesson, but it's the first thing you do when you write the lesson. Why do we write the evaluate section first? Think about that for a minute. What question do you get from your students?
Ooh.
What do they ask, Chris?
When do I need to know this?
Yeah. What's the other question they ask?
I'm never going to use this stuff.
Yeah, never going to use it. We've already answered those in some of the boxes, but they're also going to ask, is this on the test? Is this going to be on the test? Well, why is it going to be on the test? What do you put on the test? Well, you put the things on there that you think are important. And so we're going to write that evaluate section first, because we're going to get it written down for what we think as a teacher, what we think is important. And that's what's going to guide the whole process. What's this system called? This way of doing curriculum development?
Let's see. Is it forward design? No, backward design.
Yes, this is a backwards design model. We do the evaluate section first because we set our target, and then we write the lesson toward that target. Okay, then box 7, box 8, what class, what discipline most likely to do the lesson, box 8, what grade level, and so on. That's going to be aligned to what you're doing. So preliminary stuff, we figure out what we're teaching, why we're teaching it, and we write the test for it. That's what we do first. That guides everything else. Now, box number 9, that engage section. How will students get interested and excited about this? So we've got this topic on welding. I want to go through what is a 6013 rod. Well, why would a kid want to get excited about a 6013 rod? Well, come up with something. Maybe we show them what they can do with it. Maybe we show them what they could weld together. Maybe we show them a video of people using 6013 rods to weld the frame together on a street rod, something that would capture their attention. Oftentimes, this is a video found on YouTube, although I wouldn't recommend that you stick to that solely, but yeah, something that's going to get them excited about it. Then we go to the explore. This is where it's tough. This is the hardest section to write because we're so used to telling. We're going to bring them into the classroom and we're going to explain all this stuff to them. No, we're not going to do that. That doesn't work. They only remember 10% of what we say. So what activity can we come up with so that they experience or discover the material we want them to learn? Let me give you an example. In our CTE committee, we have a health science writer, health science specialist, and she used this template to write a lesson on how do you apply a tourniquet. Well, how do you explore a tourniquet? Well, we thought about that for a long time. We said, oh, we're going to take a pool noodle, you know, one of those hollow pool noodles, and we're going to tape it to the leg of a chair. So now we have a vein or an artery running down beside a bone. Pool noodle, chair leg. And we're going to pour water, red water, just for effect, down through this pool noodle. Maybe we're going to cap the bottom off. I think maybe we did end up capping off the bottom, and we filled this pool noodle full of red liquid. And then we took a knife and we sliced the pool noodle down near the bottom. And of course, the red stuff started coming out. Oh no, it's leaking all over the floor. Make sure the red stuff doesn't stain your carpet. What are we going to do? We're going to grab something and we're going to wrap it around there really tight. Now, how are we going to get it tighter? Oh, we're going to put a stick in there and we're going to start twisting the stick. And eventually we're going to twist it tight enough that all the liquid's not going to be dripping out the cut. That's how you explore a tourniquet. Now we can go back later and we can talk about, okay, what just happened? But that's the exploration in that activity. So what activity can we do that will get the students so that they discover what we want them to learn? Okay, the explain section. This is the easy part. If they're learning what we want them to learn, what questions can they answer? So with that tourniquet lesson, we say, what's a tourniquet? They say, oh, it's a strap that goes around a limb and you tighten it with a stick. And well, what does it do? Well, it pinches the artery against the bone and it pinches its artery shut. Oh, yeah, okay, guess you're getting it. But this is a formative assessment component right here.
Hey, Brad, could they also draw a picture of what a tourniquet does?
Yes, that would be a very good way for them to explain any way that they can communicate to us that they're beginning to understand what's going on. Now, we want to make sure they're not getting a misconception. We want to make sure that they're seeing that the pool noodle is a representation, that this is not a way to repair pipes, okay? We don't want this. We don't want misconceptions, because if we're teaching a misconception, you know, it could take a long time to recover from that. But we don't want them to say, well, their tourniquet worked better than my tourniquet because they have a red pool noodle and I have a green pool noodle. Well, no, we got to make sure that's not happening. But that's what these questions are for. That's the explain section. Now, notice who does the explaining. Am I standing up there explaining all this to them? No, I'm asking them questions. They're doing the explaining. How do they know this stuff? Because they experienced it. Now, one of the things we do in our lessons, in our workshops, teacher workshops, is that we have the teachers draw a cartoon of something that they've learned in the explore section. They draw the cartoon, they email it to the director of our center, and he puts it in a slideshow, and then we show that at the end of the workshop. It's really kind of fun. It's a fun way to end things. But think about the cognitive process necessary to draw a cartoon. First off, They have to think about what we've done. What have we explored? What have we experienced? Then they have to decide, well, what's the most important out of all those things? Then they have to think about, how am I going to represent that in a cartoon? How am I going to do that in a cartoon? That's crazy. And then they think about, oh no, I don't have the skill to draw that cartoon. So they've got 4 things going on there in this cognitive process. We've got them really thinking about what we're talking about. Plus, it's a lot of fun just to draw the cartoon. Okay, on to the elaborate extend section. This is where we set up some type of situation, some type of activity, some type of process where they can build on this knowledge. This is where we would take that tourniquet and not do it on a pool noodle, but maybe practice on a mannequin, or maybe even practice carefully on a person. You got to be very careful about that. But this is where the new thing goes on, where we take this a little bit further, where we apply this to a real world situation, and they can make sense of it. Because no, nurses do, EMTs do not wrap tourniquets around pool noodles. That's only the simulation. So how do we take this further? Okay, now we also, in our system, when we're writing our curriculum, we're looking at differentiation. How do you need to modify this for differently abled students? Maybe reduce change the reading level, put them in groups, things like that. We also like looking at those essential employability skills. And so we want to identify those. So we have those very clearly stated. And then how much time? We look back over this. We say, how much time is this going to take? I mean, anybody can write a lesson that's going to take 6 weeks, but is it actually worth 6 weeks? How much time can I devote to this? Resources needed. We go back through our boxes. What are we doing? Oh, we need some pool noodles. We need something to use for a tourniquet. We need something to use for a pencil or a stick, so on. And then the last thing we do, and this is kind of odd, but the last thing that we do is the first thing that the students read. We write the lesson overview. We look back through the whole thing and we say, okay, what's going on in this lesson? And we write that overview, and then that gets put on the very top of the first page. Remember how we wrote that evaluation? That was the first thing we wrote, and that's the last thing they see. So don't get the curriculum writing process mixed up with the curriculum delivery process. Okay? They do not have to be the same. So that's our practical lesson writing guide. We've used this for dozens of lessons, putting our lessons into the 5E format. Some of our writers are not real familiar with the 5E process, and they come into this and this makes sense to them. And this really transforms the way they teach. Okay, this 5E process in this presentation today, we've used it in both the micro and the macro sense. Remember, the first thing that we did was with our little circle on the circumference. That was our engage. Then we went to the explore section, and the explore section, we used an entire 5E learning cycle as the micro section. We wanted you to explore what the 5E lesson looked like. So you experience the engage, the explore, the explain, the elaborate, and the evaluate section there. Then we went to the explain section where Chris asked you a series of questions. Remember that chart that we put up that showed that what all the sections are, what the student's doing, what the teacher's doing, so on. We then went to the elaborate section where I showed you the practical lesson writing guide and how that guides us through the process of writing one of these 5E lessons. Okay, the last E of the 5E session here on the macro version is the evaluate. So now we're thinking about this. Does this make sense to us? Is this 5E model something that we could actually do in our classroom? How would it work with our students? I can tell you one thing, your A+ students won't like it, because your A+ students became A+ students by paying attention to what you were doing before. And they figured out what was going to be on the test by your body language, by what you did. They figured out what to memorize. They got good at memorizing and putting things back on tests just the way you wanted them. And they're sailing through just fine with the traditional instruction. They're probably not going to like this. They're going to tell you this requires too much thinking. In fact, we had some students one time. We had a student raise their hand and says, I'm only a 5th grader. We're not supposed to have to think this hard. Yeah, right. So your A+ students will probably rebel, but your A, your B, your C, your D students are going to love this. They're going to say, yeah, this really makes sense. How does it differ? It really differs from how the students are learning. In this case, they're learning through the project. They're doing the project. The project is the vehicle for the learning, and everything about the structure is with that project. We're not doing mini lessons up front. We're not scaffolding. We're not explaining. We're not doing pre-teaching. Get those things out of your head. No, we're not doing that. A lot of lessons available that are written in this 5E format. And Chris, you want to tell us where we can find some of those?
Yeah, so I'm going to show you our project website here in just a second, where you can find all kinds of lessons in all kinds of different disciplines. And the one we used today was on manufacturing processes. Okay, so I'm going to stop the audio portion of this or video portion of this, and I'm going to share my screen and show you where you might be able to pick up some of these 5E lessons. Okay, so you are seeing our project's website, which is ilcte.org, ilcte.org. And I'm going to scroll over to the Manufacturing, Engineering, Technology, and Trades area. Bring this side up, bring this page up. And then I'm going to scroll down a little bit further. And then the manufacturing lessons that were shown today are here. So I'm going to click on that. And then I'm going to click on manufacturing materials. Okay, so this opens up into an app called Flipping Books. And we can simply flip through each page of our lesson plan. And you might say, oh, I really like this. Maybe I can download it. Okay, so I can download this in PDF. I can also download it as a Microsoft Word document, so you can edit it. You could also download it as a Google Doc and edit that as well to whatever your needs are as that classroom teacher. So everything here is hyperlinked. So if we continue on, here was that skateboard video that I showed you right here in the Engage section. Here is another part of Explore on how office chairs are made. Here's the pencil activity that we did. And you'll notice that there are things in red here. These are suggested teacher directions. Then we have the explain section, we have the elaborate section, then we have the evaluate section. But it gets better. There's also a student edition. So hey, you've got the teacher edition, give them the student edition to do. So you might be in remote learning right now. You could send them this and say, hey, do this. Okay, so there are all the directions that they need, all the links that they need. They can complete the activity, they can do the 5E process, and they can submit their solutions. So again, this is located at ilcte.org. And again, we have different CTE lessons based on your needs. All right, so thank you for attending today's session. According to the ITEA program book, this session is on March 23rd from 2 o'clock to 2:50. But in the virtual world, time is irrelevant. But you took the chance, or you looked at our presentation title, you said, hey, I want to learn more about this professional teaching and learning in the 5E process. So we want to thank you for attending today's session, and hopefully you are better equipped to now teach the 5E process and see the value of the 5E process.
Thank you for joining us.